Hello, everybody. Back part two. We're part two in Deprogramming the Life of Che in AA. Okay, part two. This is Che over here. Go check out part one. Deprogramming Che. It's titled Transgender, Agnostic, Activism, Atheist, activist. Okay, which she is, but we're not going to get into that today.
We're going to do this again.
We're not going to get into that today, but she's going to correct me if I mess up.
They're going to correct you.
They are going to correct me
every time.
Every time. Let me ask you this right now. How offended? That's offensive because I'm saying something that it's like calling me a she, right?
Yeah.
It's just like if
or calling you president of the United States.
Right.
You're not that.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get into that, but you know what? We left off when Che was in Alcoholics Anonymous. Let's go right back there. I think we were talking about that prior. You were in Alcoholics Anonymous. You left, and then you kind of got a lot of help, a lot of therapy, a lot of education, a lot of awareness, a lot of consciousness. You expanded your mind and learned more about yourself, So let's go from there and then go back when you went back to Alcoholics Anonymous.
Well, sure. Like we talked about in part one, I was primed to find AA to be, and the 12-step programs to be a viable solution, because I was raised by and surrounded by believers and gods and so forth. And I found a freedom there because, one, I was accepted. They love bombed me. And, that felt kind of nice at first. And they told me that I didn't have to believe in any particular God. And I did not believe in the God I was raised with, which was, the Baptist narcissistic God. And so there was a freedom there. And I tried to follow the path thoroughly and get honest and with myself and other people and find out, what my part in all of my problems were. And because before AA, I thought that drugs and alcohol were my problem.
Let me stop right there, Che. First of all, this is a deprogramming podcast. This is Bobby C, and I'm Bobby C, and this is about deprogramming Alcoholics Anonymous, people that maybe went to rehab or went to treatment center or sent by the courts or sent by their parents or wherever they're sent into Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're still in there, that's great. We're just showing you some different ways, just allowing you to think more, go beyond the box and think and check other things out. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. But Che, talk about your drinking. Qualify. This is important, ladies and gentlemen. We're doing this for a reason. Qualify to the audience about your drinking use, your problematic drinking back then. Were you an alcoholic? Did you consider yourself alcoholic? Did you believe in the alcoholism model? Tell us a little bit about that, because, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to transition through that. So stay tuned. It's going to be very important, part two.
Absolutely. At the time, I believed that alcohol and drugs were my problem. Everybody told me that alcohol and drugs were my problem. And the model that was presented to me was a disease model that said I had an allergy. And the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous described my patterns, or so I thought. And I fit the textbook definition of alcoholic. I had, there's a checklist, stuff. Yeah. And do you do this? Do you do that? Do you have blackouts? Do you think about drinking all the time? Yeah. So, sure. Okay. That means I'm an alcoholic. It makes sense. And so they said that it was an allergy and a disease having something to do with a God-shaped hole in my soul. And I didn't really have a God to believe in that I cared about, that I really thought cared about me. And so people said, well, you can borrow my God until you build one of your own. So I built a God. And
So what did that God, because were you considered like you were a non-believer, or were you an atheist at that particular time, or no? Okay, you weren't. You were kind of,
I was
uh,
very confused.
right, you were programmed like myself from a religion into Alcoholics Anonymous. So you were building, like you said prior, you did a build a bear instead of build a bear, you were build a God. So go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. And I mean, I got a lot of stuff out of the program that I found helpful for me at the time. On the other hand, there is a lot of bullshit in there, and it was killing me, and I didn't know that. And I basically kept going back and re-traumatizing myself with the same nonsense, the same harmful ideology that's based on evangelical fundamentalism, Christianity in this country. And I had no idea that religious trauma syndrome was something that I really needed to be aware of or learn about.
Yeah, that's look, the courts send people to Alcoholics Anonymous. There's no separation at church and state. We know that. Right on the dollar bill, it says, "In God we trust." Come on, let's be real, ladies and gentlemen. I want to get back to some of the. I mean, you knew you had problems with alcohol. You were getting into some trouble or a little bit of trouble. Was alcohol starting to be troublesome for you?
Well, it would appear so. Um, I was I was a mess, and I did a lot of harm unknowingly to a lot of people, and had a lot of guilt and shame. And it just seems like I'd get drunk and just burn shit down.
Right. I can
I
relate
mean,
there.
not literally, but
No, I
you know,
understand. I understand.
burning bridges, and if people were standing on them, well, that's their problem, isn't it?
Right, right, right. And that,
Besides, ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?
hey, and at that time, both of us, well, we were trying to, you know, they were just pumping God into us, pumping spirituality, this fake spirituality stuff, and uh, really what they were doing is pumping AA principles and AA cult mentality into us constantly, you know, and so it was really hard in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to always go outside to kind of find stuff about myself, about my relationships with other human beings, and how I could learn things and grow things, and how other people's how other people affected me, how like other people shit pushed my buttons, and how I reacted to other people and how they reacted to me. They they weren't teaching me none of that shit in Alcoholics Anonymous. Here we go into Alcoholics Anonymous. You got maybe a week, sobriety. You go in there, they're going to work you through the 12 steps, and here you're going to be cleansed. All the trauma, all the PSTD, all the shit that you went through, all the stuff that we're learning about psychology, about the cognitive behavioral therapy, about ourselves, about life, about society, about the universe. They ain't teaching us none of that shit. Okay, and we're trapped in a prison of this illusion of this pyramid, thinking that we're getting better. Oh, we're getting better. Yeah, we're only better when we're running to a damn meeting, because out on the outside of life, we're still screwed up. Okay. So yeah, we're addicted to meetings. And Jay mentioned that we get addicted to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Sorry about that, Jay. Go ahead.
I went to a lot of meetings partly because one, it was a community, it was a safe place where I seemed to be welcome and and
There was a lot of them.
yeah, a lot of them. And then I got really involved because I do that. I get into something and I hyper focus on it and I want to learn it, I want to know it, I want to do it right. And so, they told me that I had an original sin. I mean, I was powerless and that I needed a higher power that was not me, something outside myself, which became sponsors who had to be sponsored by a sponsor who was sponsored by a sponsor, and it's just big mess there. And I had to recognize my part. If I'm still angry because I was abused as a child, well, my part is carrying that anger because the program is all about toxic positivity. We all have to demonstrate. The people who are the guru wannabes, the ones that everybody wants to have them be the sponsor, or they get asked to speak at conventions or be the speaker at speaker night because they're living the promises on the outside. They look, like the program works, and they're spouting all of the steps and how, I mean, regurgitating Bill Wilson. And I did that shit. And I got involved in service work and committees and
Yeah, just over and over and over again. But okay, so
then I got out
yeah,
for a
you're in.
while.
You're in.
I was
You're
in.
the second time you're really in. Is that the first time or the second time?
That was the first time.
Okay, so now you took a
And then I
break.
left.
You left, and now you got in a little. You still were screwed up in the head because they weren't helping us with nothing that we didn't know. We wanted to know or we needed to learn. So you're still screwed up. I'm still screwed up. You come out. What happens? And real quickly, let's take you through it because we talked about this in the last podcast.
Yeah. Well, I got drunk several times and realized that I didn't like being that drunk, and then learned I didn't have to be that drunk. I could drink and not get that drunk, which was something that they told me wouldn't happen, couldn't happen, because once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. And but my experience that so aligned with everything that they told me when I was in wasn't aligning when I was out. And
And
I found that to be curious. And then
and
I read a book about moderation management. And it's like that seemed to validate my experience that that I was going through now, because I can drink when I want to drink. I can stop when I want to stop, and I can enjoy getting tipsy. I could even enjoy getting drunk sometimes. Um, and I can go for periods of time without even thinking about wanting a drink or drinking or anything. So this didn't align with everything that I had previously been convinced was true. And then
now,
I also started using other drugs, and um, drugs, the scary drugs. I use meth and didn't, and I didn't follow the same tragic path leading to jails and all of the stuff, the bad stuff that was going to happen that hadn't happened yet. There's a big sign that's on the wall of pretty much every AA meeting room that I've ever been to that says yet. It's that fear thing. Oh, it hasn't happened to you yet. But
so what other so how long were you out from the time you were in, because you were in about 7 years, 6, 7 years, how long did you stay out and you were kind of researching and kind of checking
getting my degree, climbing the corporate ladder.
checking all other things out and becoming aware of new things about yourself?
Yeah. Well, I stayed out until I went on, until I found myself no longer able to be gainfully employed. with disability and went out on disability and no longer able to afford to stay on my own where I was at, I moved back home. And home for me was back to my hometown of area of Southwest Missouri. And so I'm now looking for my friends and my community. And all of my friends were the people that I had met in the program. So
Now,
it seemed to make sense that I'd go back.
now, didn't you tell me, I think on the last part one, that you did do some therapy work. You did do some CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness. You did do some studies prior to going back again.
Oh, I did. Yes. A lot of work.
A lot of work. And how long were you out of the program?
You're going to ask me to math? I think I told you earlier I don't math.
No, 6 months, a year, 2 years.
Several years. It was
Several
several
years.
years.
That's it. I don't do math.
Yeah.
Several years. You stayed out several years. You did
Couple
a lot
of decades.
You did a lot of work on your own. CBT. You went to counseling. You did a little bit of this, a little bit of experiment with that, kind of checking your own body and your own self. No one's telling you what to do or what to think or how to do or where to go.
And I was on narcotics. They were prescribed by doctors and specialists. I was on a lot of drugs to deal with the chronic pain and the physical disabilities that I had started to suffer from, deal with. And my experience being on those drugs also didn't align with everything that they told me would happen if I took any of those substances, so I had several years where I was under the care of doctors and specialists and on all those heavy drugs that I've heard people say, oh, they won't even let themselves take a fucking pain pill when they have a tooth pulled out because they're so terrified that it's a slippery slope that's going to lead them to a relapse and jails, institutions, and death.
Now, let me just touch on that because Jay and I were talking prior to recording, and she made up a good point. They made up a good point, and here's the point. To the viewers, to the young people, I don't care how old you are, there is danger in using tons of alcohol, getting really super drunk, driving. You can end up in jail. You can go into an institution. You can even die. Okay, that's the truth. That I'm not here to say that's not true. That's not bullshit. That can be true. But the true other thing is, Che will tell you, is that you can go to jail so many different other ways. You could be in an institution by just not working on yourself and constantly thinking or have a nervous breakdown without alcohol and drugs. You can die so many other ways. Okay.
Like I said in part one, I found myself to be more of a danger to myself and suicidal after 1 year in their program, thoroughly following their path.
I understand that. Because following their path is it's impossible. It's just a circle jerk. And it's just these 12 steps to constantly make you loop around there with perpetuity. It's like ever ending, eternal confession, admitting, amends, and recruiting.
And recruiting, yes, absolutely.
So yes, I can understand that. And a lot of people, like I had to go seek out like one-on-one therapy and group therapy during this transition because I'm like, something's wrong here. You know what I mean? I'm not getting better. I'm still fighting with my wife and I'm still doing crazy shit on the outside, which I still do now. I'm not saying I'm perfect. Still, ask my wife, she'll tell you. But I'm not learning these things. So, I was lucky in the beginning. Even in the beginning, I was picking up books. I was listening to Anthony Robbins, motivational speakers. I was listening to Wayne Dyer way back then. I was going to CODA meetings. I was going to ACOA. I was trying to dib and dab in a lot of different things, man, because I was I was on a search, because I wasn't getting it there, and I didn't buy all the shit there. Okay, I wasn't a big book thumper myself. I probably only sponsored 3 people in 30 years because I didn't believe. I didn't believe all this stuff. I didn't believe how I got to brainwash people to believe on all this stuff because I don't even buy it all. Okay, I proved that it didn't work and did work, so I kept on. I was very cognitive dissonance, and I was a hypocrite to myself. And that's when I had this is bullshit. And then I was saying stuff that they didn't want to hear anyhow. People didn't come up to me because I wasn't a big book thumper, but they come up to me and say, "Hey, Bobby, I liked what you said. I only thought about that. No one else talks about that. I talk about stuff that somebody else didn't talk about, But I can relate. Back to you, Che.
Yeah, I found that to be interesting as well because people would come up to me privately and say, "I really relate. I really get what you're saying." But then they also banded together to keep me from talking. Like and or so it seemed. I butted heads with people when I came back. I tried to do I wanted to be of service. I've always wanted to help people. Um my way of helping wasn't always very helpful, I've learned, but that I wanted to be helpful. And so and now I had time because I wasn't working a full-time job. I was all I had was time. So yeah, let me be of service. I'll help the group. I want to help people. So I got back into service work, and that's where I started noticing that there were certain people that seem to want to control everything and gather pigeons, like a little flock, um, and set themselves up like some kind of guru, spiritual advisor, and it's like, oh, that doesn't sit right with me either. What is
Not,
going on? So I started just watching and listening more because it wasn't aligning, and I kept trying to shape and whittle down my own experience to fit inside their
I
frame
can relate to that.
until I started thinking maybe it's not my experience that's the problem. Maybe this fucking frame is too fucking small.
I can relate to that 100%. That lasted a long, long time with me. And you were right. The controlling minority. You get 20 people at a meeting, right? 10 of them just come in and out. They don't care. The other 10, then you have 5 controlling minorities. They got this. They do this. They do the book studies. They go here. They got sponsors. Blah, 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 blah. So here, I can really relate to when you're saying you would say stuff. People would come up to you and say, "Hey, Bobby, I like what you said." It's the newcomer or it's the other guy. It's always but somehow you felt the other ones were looking at you like, Bobby, you ain't working a program right, man. The other 5 controlling minorities, like, I don't know, Bobby, man. Even my sponsor, I'd say shit, and I had this sponsor. I loved him. I liked him because he was a good person. He never got the big book and pounded me, because if he did, I'd say I'd leave him in a minute anyhow.
I
But
was fired. I was fired as a sponsor when I was a big book thumper. And then they came back and asked me to sponsor them again. And I did, and thumped them again with the big book. And they rightly fired my ass again.
So we can relate to this shit, I mean, that's. Oh, here's another thing. Touch on this. You get a chip in Alcoholics Anonymous. You got your chip, okay? Now we're in all those years. Oh God! Now you left. You went and drank. You went and used. You got aware. You became aware. You started to think. You questioned, observed. You started to go to therapy and everything. You come back up, and you're a beginner. You didn't learn shit, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
I don't know if I picked up a chip. I'd have to think about that when I went back, because
Shame, maybe I don't want to tell, maybe the shame or the guilt, or maybe why should I pick up another coin or something like that? Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I do remember um, just really starting to notice the things that didn't align. And so I started sitting back and watching. One time they asked me to read how it works. And so I did. And this time I decided, because I am usually this way, I decided to change God's gender to she and read the entire piece with God as I understand her. And holy shit, you would have thought I killed some people's puppies.
Oh yeah.
The attacks that I got after that. And it was like, oh, well, this is interesting. What do you do with that? It's like,
I can relate to
well,
that. I can relate to that 100%, because how do you think I got as Bobby C sees it? As Bobby C sees it, from as Bill sees it. I used to sit in the as Bill sees it meetings, candlelight, and with the little black book as Bill sees it. Yeah, all the spiritual and God shit in that little book. And I'd say, I don't relate to this. I don't really relate to this. And they'd look at you like, oh, well, that we're talking about this. You got to talk about as Bill sees it. No, it says Bobby sees it today. Okay. It says Bobby sees it. And as Che sees it, as Monica sees it, as John sees it, Billy sees it, Sharon sees it. It's not as Bill sees it anymore.
and I don't even care if people see it the way I see it your own way, and there's one of the atheist content creators on YouTube, Shannon Q, who talks about advocate for your own understanding. Don't take my word for it. I am not a guru. I'm not a savior. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a sponsor. Don't put me on a fucking pedestal. I don't belong on one, and neither do you.
Right on, right on. Okay, so you're back in. You got all kinds of education on the outside. They would say, when people come back, oh, you lost everything. Here's your 1-day chip. Okay, they didn't lose nothing. They gained information. They experienced life. All their past life experience is not wasted. How dare you say it's wasted? And here you start over again. That's bull crap.
Unless you lie about it. There was one person who showed up in our area claiming, like decades of sobriety, which then of course elevated them to some kind of special status, and then got invited to be a speaker and was asked to be a sponsor, and then finally confessed that, well, they didn't really have 20 years of consecutive sobriety.
Oh, they had to confess, lest they would have went to hell. They would have went
Matter
to
of
hell.
fact, they just, they did drink a year ago, so they've really only, but they can't, and it's true, you can't really dismiss years of experience because of what somebody will label a relapse. But on the other hand, I don't know.
I'm with you on that. Okay, so
And
you're
then
back
I
in.
also notice how everybody's, if somebody came in as a newcomer because they were either sentenced by the courts or because, like we talked about earlier, it's the only game in town, and they show up and they've got some skepticism going on, and they're sitting back going, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Why? And it was like how I've heard about, chickens will attack the weakest little chicken in the yard, and everybody would jump on them and start bullying them, just gang up on them and start telling them how wrong they are, how they're in denial, how, well, if it hasn't happened to you yet, it will. If you keep going down the path you're on, you need to be on our path. We have the only answer, even though we say that this isn't the only answer. But oh my God, once you get sucked in, it really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when they say God, they mean AA. Okay. When they use the
Exactly.
word God, they mean AA. Just replace it with Alcoholics Anonymous, because you got to follow that path. And if you don't, you're screwed. And it says it in the traditions, you're going to drink again if you don't do this or that. Okay. Let's go through now. This is what I'm going to try to get to, ladies and gentlemen. How long did you stay in that second time?
I came back here in 2013, 2014, And I started noticing these things. I tried to get involved. I became a DCM, so a district representative, going to the area meetings, and then I started butting heads with people and noticing these things that didn't align. And plus the fact that I was in a tremendous amount of pain. The opioid crisis happened, and the doctors stopped prescribing me the narcotics, which helped, you know, dull the edges of the sharp edges of that pain. So there I was, unmedicated and suffering, and no amount of prayers or service work is going to deal with that shit. So I started, I I started smoking pot again, and found that while it has a lot of benefits for me, I mean, and I use it regularly, um, it doesn't help the pain nearly as well as the narcotics that they won't let me have. But, you know,
But
gotta do what I gotta do to deal with what I gotta deal with,
it's
so
almost like craft. It's almost like you're managing the pain. You're in your own self-management of your situation, of your life. How about let's talk a little bit about the alcohol use today. How long did you stay in the second time before you totally walked out?
well, after that, the political problems I experienced with the other people in the program that were trying to control everything, I found that it was just easier to stay home. No, I don't wanna deal with that shit. They were pushing me out of my volunteer service positions because they had their own little pigeons that they wanted to get into those slots so that they could, play the puppet master. And so it's like, I don't need this shit. And it's hard for me physically to get out and sit through those meetings anyway in those hard ass chairs and listen to the same people tell the same shit over and over again. And everybody has to look good and positive and pray away their character defects like anger. And so it's like, just fuck this shit. So I stayed home.
So what year was that?
That was, I
About
think,
about.
around 2018, 2019.
Okay, so then COVID hit, and then 2019, we're 2 years in, and bam. So
I
where
deconstructed my spiritual beliefs. I learned about um I started uh, I started going to watching philosophy lectures from um Cambridge University and Yale, and and that were online. And then I found debates between atheists and Christians, and I found atheist content creators on YouTube, like we talked about, um, the atheist community of Austin, and recovering from religion, and and then so while I was home by myself, um, always reading, always searching, I realized that I had been seeking, because I started with a conclusion, and then I went out seeking for supporting evidence that confirmed my the conclusion I started with. And in this process of deconstruction, I realized I can't start with the conclusion. I have to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it takes me someplace really uncomfortable, where I realized that all of the reasons I had for believing in a god or gods or higher powers or souls didn't hold up.
I
They
can
just
relate.
they weren't sound arguments, they weren't valid arguments.
I can relate to that. Let me just pause right here. I can really relate to that because it was about 6 years ago. I was taking care of two elderlies in Arizona. And I was living there. I was coming back and forth. I was flying from California back to Arizona. I was managing this couple, and I would hire other people to come in while I wasn't there. And I stayed away from AA right there in town because there were so many meetings in town. I started one of the biggest meetings in the town, and I stopped going and I started researching too. That's the time I started researching everything and started getting validations from other sources to validate what I felt, believed, and which I observed throughout life, and all this stuff started to happen. So it was about 5 years. And then I would go to a meeting. I would pop in a meeting because everybody knew me. And it's not that I was of some big shop, but it was a small town. I'd pop in a meeting and I'd sit there and think, let me just go and relax. At the end, I just couldn't even go to a meeting. I would go late, make sure I missed the commercials because it's 15 minutes of commercials, readings and shit. I'd make sure I'd miss them, and I'd sit there and I'd listen. I'm trying to listen to something that could be different, something that could kind of stimulate my thinking and give me some purpose, of or validation of what was going on with I was experiencing. Nothing, never. I just
same old.
I couldn't stand it. I just completely stopped. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? And that's when I started to research really because you have to remember 37 years ago, there was no internet when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. There was nothing. They sent you to AA, you were an alcoholic and that was it. Okay. So I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm still searching all these other avenues, but I'm not going to the internet like I should. And I started doing that about 6 years ago, 6-7 years ago. And that's when stuff really clicked. And then COVID hit. Then I started to be isolated. And not that I bought all the shit, but I started to be isolated and I started to start the YouTube channels. And I started to go and connect. I seek, wherever the attention goes, wherever the energy goes, wherever the tension goes, the energy flows. So I started to put my attention into people online doing podcasts, and I would text them back, hey, can I come on your podcast? Can I do this? Would you like to do this? And then I started my own podcast, and then I got started to get involved, and I started to find my own purpose again. Started to validate myself. And I didn't need other people's validations because I was going and seeking all these other things outside of me and finding out that it's in here,
Exactly.
And I'm not a fanatic in one anymore. I don't follow just one thing. I don't believe in one avenue, and at this COVID thing helped me to set me free. Okay. It helped me to set me free.
Well, after I deconstructed and realized I have no reason that warrants a belief in any God. What does this mean? Holy shit. So I went back to the meeting because there were two of my friends there that identified as atheists. So I went back to ask them, what the fuck is going on? Why didn't you tell me this shit? Why did you let these people continue in their delusions? Why did you let me continue in my delusion? Why didn't you call me out on my shit? And I stopped identifying myself as an alcoholic. I'd sit there and I'd just like, what is this? What is heck? Can I do AA without a God? Well, I don't know. Well, let's see. So I would sit and observe, and I'd talk to my two atheist friends, and then one day, one of them says on the way out, he stops and says, at the risk of leaving you in a pit of despair, you might want to go research the orange papers. Like, the orange papers? Okay. So I researched the orange papers. Holy shit, I'm in a cult. I'm in a fucking cult. Of course I'm in a cult. Yeah, of course I'm in a cult. It's absolutely a cult, and I'm in it. Well, that makes sense. Now I can't. I got to run away. I ran away. Oh, I ran away. And now I'll tell anyone who'll listen. It's a fucking cult. Get the fuck out of there. Run away. Save yourself.
The weird part about it is, though, I do believe we were in, and I ain't going to say, everybody's going to say there was a reason, but you know what? Look, we were in a long time. I was in for a damn long time, and I'm not ashamed to say it. In a sense, I am, but I'm not ashamed to say it because I always tried to, I was deprogramming while I was in. And I always tried to help other people actually deprogram. That's what I was doing all along, trying to help other people deprogram. I didn't even know it. I'm in this cult and I don't buy all this shit. And I'm helping other people kind of expand their consciousness because all along I am too. I'll tell you what, I'm thankful for that shit. And then talk about forgiveness. That's all they wanted for you to do is forgive people. Here they're sexually abused and everybody, and they're doing all this shit, and they want you to talk about forgiveness and go to your perpetrator, go to your the pedophile, or go to this person that did this shit and say, I'm sorry. Bullshit. Forget about that forgiveness.
I've hated you all these years, and I feel really bad about hating you. I'm sorry for hating you. Can you forgive me?
Right.
Fucking bullshit.
Yeah. At the end, we could talk about maybe at the very end, and it doesn't even have to happen, but at the end it could be like, I forgive myself for this attachment of this person, this bullshit, and that's about it. But yeah, that's another whole topic. Let's see, where are we at? Okay, so you can use today, let's call it recreational use of marijuana, alcohol. You kind of control. Here, let me ask you this. This is what I believe. I believe if I take 5 shots of alcohol, it does have control. It's a very powerful drug, alcohol. Okay, so if I take 5 shots of alcohol, it does have some effect and control over my body, mind, and whatever. Okay, I'm not going to deny that, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about people that, like yourself, that are aware of what's going on. Today because of your transition, or being you were involving, becoming aware of yourself, of Alcoholics Anonymous, of society, of this thing called the disease, of this powerless bullshit. You became aware, and that's the beautiful part. Let's start closing with that. And maybe you could read that thing if you have it in front of you, talking about I got out, and maybe talk a little bit about that, and we'll close on that.
Okay. I was recently a participant in a writing workshop with the I Got Out organization, and it's an organization that helps people and supports people that are getting out of and have gotten out of cults. And as part of this writing workshop, we had a 20-minute timed writing session where we wrote on 3 different prompts. I got out of, when I, and now. And so this is what I wrote. I got out of that church, that town, that hell of a family home, juvenile detention, that life, that school, that marriage, that closet, that trauma bonded relationship, my bed, my grave, my shackles, my fantasy, that mindset, those misbeliefs, that cult of love bombing, victim blaming group of self righteous guru wannabes, that Build a God workshop, more closets, magical thinking, the corporate ladder of corporatism, their clutches, their expectations, and their standards. I got out of that. When I realized it hurt, didn't make sense, noticed I didn't belong, found I no longer fit, outgrew it, wanted more me, authenticity, found that I would rather deal with uncomfortable truths, was no longer satisfied with comforting lies, knew I deserved more, found my voices, clenched my fists, decided to resist, had had enough of the shit that didn't match my values. And now I am free to choose, to doubt, to change my minds, to speak up, to speak out, to love who I love, to play, to leave, to stem and unmask, to exist, to create, to become my own best friend, to trust my perceptions, to be wrong, to learn and grow, to say fuck more often, make up my own words, to set boundaries, choose my friends, define myself, tell my story, own my past and my parts, to not carry others and do their emotional labor, to not have all the answers, to say no, to not explain or over explain, to stop chasing people who choose to leave. I am free to choose who is family, to mock the absurd, and to sing, to write, and art my way.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. I loved it. I want you to do me a favor. You know, this is Anonymous Addiction, Deprogramming Alcoholics Anonymous podcast, but we're not deprogramming just AA. We're deprogramming ourselves, society, the world, the universe. And Jake just read that. Do me a favor. Could you type that out and send that to Alcoholics Anonymous Addiction private group so you could post that right on there?
I've got it on it's already a post on my Instagram and my Patreon account
Could you
and
post
my
that to,
Facebook. I'll be happy to forward that to your group. Yes.
please forward
Thank
that to
you.
the group so I can approve that and put that up there because that's beautiful. I'm telling you. How can they get a hold of you?
They can find me on Instagram at Doing Ya Outside the Lines. That's all one word, DOANYAOUTSIDE Doing Ya Outside the Lines on Instagram. I've got a Patreon page. My Instagram has my link tree on there, so you can find me all kinds of places, all over the socials.
Che, beautiful. Part 2, deprogramming Che in AA. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. And don't forget to subscribe to Anonymous Addiction. You can go to Facebook at Anonymous Addiction. My Truth About AA, as Bobby C sees it, private group. You can check me out on Spotify or Anchor. We check out the link tree. I do have a link tree, and it kind of takes us to all these places. It was beautiful. I had a great time.
I did too. I really appreciate the opportunity, Bobby. Thank you so much for doing this work. We got to expose this shit because it's killing people.
Say goodbye. Bye-bye.